Hello everyone, my name is Yara and today we're talking about annotating. Annotating is a really interesting thing because some people really prefer to do it and some people really hate it. A lot of people think that it takes away from the reading experience because you do have to stop reading to take notes. But then again, some people think that it adds to the reading experience because it keeps you more engaged. And for me personally, I definitely agree that when I do annotate, I definitely get a better experience out of reading. I think I remember the book more, I can make a more coherent and a more valuable review. And honestly, sometimes it's really fun because you can kind of interact with the characters in the novel. Obviously, they can't respond, but it's like you're inserting yourself into the story more so than reading already does. How I annotate, however, and how much largely depends on how lazy I am when I'm reading the book. Because some days you can fully devote yourself to a book, you don't have any other plans, you're free. So if you want to take some time to really think about the book and process your thoughts, then you have that time. But for most people, reading is usually squeezed in between jobs or school or other responsibilities. And because that time reading is usually spent to relax or to wind down, sometimes you don't really want to add any extra work to that. And I find myself in those situations pretty often, and it's kind of a challenge to decide whether I want to put a little more effort and annotate or to just sit back and relax and read. But over the past couple months, I realized that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing. There are different levels to annotating based off of how lazy you are pretty much, and how much effort you want to put into it. And hopefully show you different ways that you can utilize yourself to give you more flexibility and leeway if you do want to annotate but find that you don't want to go all out. So the structure of this video is going to be starting from level 1, which is the most lazy, to level 5, which is the least lazy, as in the most amount of work that needs to be put in. Also, I should mention that while I'm placing these into discrete levels, there's a lot of potential overlap and mixing and matching of different strategies to figure out what works best for you. This is kind of my personal experience that has worked out for me depending on what I want to do. And without further ado, let's begin. So level 1 is kind of a cop-out, and it's just don't annotate. There's really no lazier way you can get with annotating than just to not annotate. Though, just because you aren't physically annotating doesn't mean you don't have to mentally take note of what you're feeling. And that may sound kind of intuitive and honestly taken for granted because what are you doing if you're not thinking when you're reading? But speaking from my own personal experience, there is a difference between just reading the book and then stopping me once in a while to think about what I like and what I dislike. Sometimes it happens very organically and very naturally that you have a reaction to something in the book, but sometimes you do have to sit down and reflect about what you've read to give your honest thoughts and actually process what you've been reading. And this strategy is good for situations where one, you don't really want to annotate, but you still need to be actively engaged in the reading. Or if at the time you're reading you can't annotate physically. For example, I encounter this a lot when I read audiobooks in the car because I'm driving and I can't write down anything or type anything. I have tried voice to text mode, but especially with fantasy books and with the weird names and stuff, like it doesn't work out a lot of times. Next is level 2, which is writing down notes in your phone. Now this is by far the most utilized strategy for me. I have done it, I think, for almost every book that I've read since I started my channel. And it has been a massive help for me to help me remember what I read, because I am so bad at remembering what I read. Like, I literally will finish the book and half of the information will slip out. So I need to have that written, documented stuff to remind me of how I felt. So pretty much what I do is that at any point of the story when I have some sort of reaction or I have some sort of thought, I'll write down the page number that I'm on as well as the thought that I have or the reflection that I have. And sometimes these are really specific to the page or to the quote. And when there's a specific quote, sometimes I will type out the specific quote or at least part of it so I know when looking back what I'm referring to. Or sometimes it's very general, like a kind of check-in sort of thing where I talk about, am I liking the book so far? Is the pace slow? Are the characters well developed? You could also use this strategy with writing on physical paper, like in a notebook, but personally, I think that writing on your phone is lazier. One, because your phone is almost always on you, at least for me, it's literally almost always on me, so it's very easily accessible. But also because typing gives you emojis, and sometimes I just want to write my reaction, and I'll just put like the cry face emoji or the laughing crying emoji. And emojis, they can convey so much about what you're feeling in that moment. So I find them incredibly useful. Also on the iPhone Notes app, you can organize your books into folders. So I just have one big folder called Book Thoughts, and then I write the title of the book as the kind of heading of whatever notes I have. and that way I feel really organized having them all in one space. This strategy actually works really well with audiobooks because since you don't have a physical copy, it's easy to have it organized on your phone. And if you have an app like Audible, there's actually an option where you can take notes and it'll mark it at the exact minute and second that you are on. So you have them all attached to the book you're reading on the app. Level 3 is highlighting and writing in the margins of the actual book. Honestly, this is pretty similar to writing notes on your phone, except you're writing it directly on the page. However, in my opinion, it does take a lot more effort than just writing on your phone. One, because writing itself takes longer than typing. And also, that means that whenever you're reading the book, you have to have a pen, a highlighter, or something on you. I think this strategy is what most people consider to be annotating. And I find it kind of fun and useful because it does seem like you're directly interacting with the text and with the characters. And it is fun to revisit if you're rereading that same copy of the novel, and you can add on to your own annotations. If you are up for a little more work, I would suggest adding a little tab wherever you annotate because it just makes it so much easier if you want to refer back to it later just to find where you wrote something. It doesn't have to be color-coded or mean anything in terms of the color of the tab, just to note that you wrote something on that page. Level 4 is color-coded tabs. Now this one does take a lot of work and a lot of dedication, but it is really fun and pretty once you finish it. So this works by basically assigning a color with some sort of trait that you are going to track throughout the novel. So for example, you can make one about tracking characters and good character moments, one that talks about stuff important to the plot. For fantasy, a lot of times I do one for world building. And then there could also be one for parts that you love, parts that you didn't like, stuff like that. And I would usually use this in conjunction with writing in the tabs. Not always, sometimes I will just have the tab to know that this section of the book has something to do with that trait. But a lot of times I'll be commenting about something that the trait relates to. For example, if I don't like something in the book, I'll write why I don't like it and then put the tab there to mark it. And because different genres of books typically have different characteristics that are integral to them, I will add a key that has what each color means and just stick it into the inside cover. How I assigned my colors was based off of Kaz's video from Little Book Owl. She made an annotating video and I kind of was inspired by her to start doing the color-coded tabs. So yeah, definitely check out her video if you want more details about that. I don't typically do this. I only do this if I have a lot of time that I can just dedicate to reading and I'm somewhere where I'm comfortable and sitting and I can have my pen, my highlighter, and my tabs with me. But since that's not often the case, it's not something that I often do. Though I do wish I could. Now level 5, the least lazy method, as in requiring a lot of freaking work, is sticky note annotating and pretty much just annotating for school. Technically, sticky note editing could be used at an earlier level, like in place of writing in the margins, you can just write on a sticky note and stick it in there. But the reason why I put it here is because I usually use sticky note editing for school books. And the reason is because that when I write in the margin, it's usually limited to 1 or 2 sentences. It's not that deep, pretty much. When you're annotating for school or for educational value, you're not just processing your emotions and reacting. You have to synthesize the information and take it one step further. At least that's the hope. And I might end up writing like a paragraph. So I will need a decent amount of space to write, so I use sticky notes. That is usually why when I have to read books for school, I have to read them at a desk where there's a quiet environment. I actually have annotated like this while walking in the park once. Not ideal, but possible. But yeah, I would prefer to do this in a quiet environment where I could just focus and really think about what I'm reading. While it is a lot of work, it actually is really useful. I can say from personal experience that if I annotate a book actively while I'm reading it, it makes it so much easier to do assignments for school or to write an essay later on. So yeah, this is not really a common method that people would use for reading for pleasure, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it either for that unless you do personally find enjoyment in it. The only time that I used this for when I was reading books for pleasure was in 7th grade because that was when I first started learning how to read critically, and I just did it with every book that I read. And so yeah, I was trying to critically engage with books like Twilight and Rick Riordan. It wasn't like I was writing these actual analyses. I was literally defending why Jacob didn't wear a shirt. Those were strange times when I was 13. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and maybe you'll implement some of these methods into your reading life or not. Do whatever pleases you. If you're looking to learn how to annotate, I hope this helped you. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.